Gutierrez joins us now. So CBS News confirmed through the Pima County Sheriff that Nancy Guthrie's doorbell cam is the only video that Google has been able to recover from her home, but there are other cameras from the property,
Lindsay,
right?
I just lost IFB communication with you, but there are additional cameras here on the property. We did see FBI agents pluck one from the rooftop here on Friday the 6th. Right now, there are engineers over at Google who are trying to extract video from that camera to see if there's anything usable. The investigators are hopeful that they'll be able to do that. It comes as the Sheriff's Department told CBS News that they have not ruled out the possibility that the person in that doorbell video had an accomplice the night that Nancy was taken. This afternoon, the agency released a brief update to the media in which they said that DNA...
This is the Crime Blackline Archive, and today we are going deep into one of the most technically sophisticated and emotionally devastating investigations of 2026. We are talking about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, the mother of NBC Today show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie, a case involving a masked intruder, a Bitcoin ransom, a pacemaker disconnecting in the middle of the night, and a buried piece of footage that federal agents spent days trying to drag back from the edge of digital oblivion. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here at the Crime Blackline Archive, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell. We cover cases like this with depth, accuracy, and the kind of detail the headlines skip. Now let's get into it. Let's start right where the story gets strange, because the most important thing you need to understand about this case is not the kidnapping itself. It's the camera. Specifically, it's what the camera was doing when everyone insisted it was doing nothing. The device mounted on Nancy Guthrie's front door was a Google Nest video doorbell. You've seen them. Millions of Americans have one. You buy it at a big box store, you mount it by the door, you connect it to your Wi-Fi, and you feel a little safer. The value proposition is simple. Someone comes to your door, the camera records it, and you can watch it back later from your phone. There is, however, a catch that very few consumers fully understand. And that catch is buried inside a tiered subscription model that Google does not exactly advertise prominently. Here is what the Nest system actually offers. Without any paid subscription, the camera still provides what the company calls event-based video history, up to 3 hours of footage triggered by detected motion, stored in the cloud for a limited window. 3 hours, free, available to anyone with the device, whether or not they're paying a monthly fee. This is not a secret, but it is also not what gets featured on the box. Most consumers who don't subscribe to a premium plan assume that means their camera stores nothing. They are wrong. Sheriff Chris Nanos told the public that because Nancy did not have an active subscription, there was no video. That statement was, at minimum, incomplete. And the FBI, when they looked more carefully at what Nest's infrastructure actually does, found that the situation was far more nuanced than the sheriff had suggested. Here is where the real forensic science begins. Nick Barrero, an audio and video forensic analyst, explained the underlying mechanism with precision when reporters began asking how the FBI had managed to recover footage from a camera that was supposedly not recording. Deletion, Barrero said, is not what most people think it is. When a digital system marks data for deletion, it is not erasing the underlying ones and zeros, it is simply flagging the storage space as available to be reused. The content itself remains physically intact until something new is written on top of it. Until that space is actually reused, Barrero explained, the old data can still be recoverable. This is not a quirk or a loophole. It is how digital storage has always worked, at every level from a personal hard drive to a global server farm. But most consumers, and apparently some local law enforcement officers, operate under the intuitive but incorrect assumption that deletion means erasure. Adam Malone, a former FBI special agent who specialized in cybersecurity investigations, added another layer of complexity that is crucial to understanding what the Bureau actually did in this case. Cloud-based applications, Malone explained, don't operate as a single file traveling from a camera to a server. They operate across multiple processing layers, compression systems, rendering pipelines, distributed storage nodes spread across thousands of servers in different geographic locations. Each layer in that chain is a potential place where data can temporarily reside. They probably reviewed the development pipelines, Malone said, and checked whether there was historical data waiting to be deleted. Read that sentence again carefully. The FBI was not searching a simple video archive. They were working backward through the engineering infrastructure of one of the most sophisticated technology companies in the world, looking for fragments of data that had been transmitted upstream but had not yet been overwritten. It required technical expertise that goes well beyond what any local sheriff's department possesses, and it required the cooperation of Google's own engineers working under the authority of a federal search warrant. FBI Director Kash Patel described the process publicly as recovering footage from residual data located in back-end systems. The Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed the same in an official statement. What neither statement fully conveyed was just how remarkable that recovery was, or how much it depended on the FBI understanding something fundamental about cloud architecture that the initial public narrative had gotten wrong. Now, with that technical foundation established, let's go back to the night it all began, and to the woman at the center of it. To understand what happened to Nancy Guthrie, you first have to understand who she was and how she lived, because the details of her daily routine would ultimately become the foundation of a criminal investigation watched by millions of people across the country. Nancy Ellen Guthrie, born Nancy Long on January 27, 1942, in Fort Wright, Kentucky, had spent the better part of 5 decades building her life in the Sonoran Desert. She moved to the Tucson area in the early 1970s with her family and never left. Her husband, Charles Guthrie, died in 1988 during a mining exploration trip in Mexico, leaving Nancy to raise their 3 children, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron, largely on her own. She was 46 years old when she lost him. She kept going. By the time she turned 84, Nancy was, by all accounts, exactly the kind of woman you'd want living in your neighborhood. She was independent, mentally sharp, and deeply embedded in her community. Her faith was important to her. She regularly tuned into online church services. Her family was everything. Her daughter Annie lived nearby. Her youngest daughter Savannah had become one of the most recognizable faces on American morning television as the co-anchor of NBC's Today show. Nancy was proud of all of them and made no secret of it. But Nancy also had health challenges. She needed daily medication, the kind where missing a dose wasn't just uncomfortable, it was medically serious. She had limited mobility, and she had a pacemaker, the kind that synced wirelessly with an app on her phone, quietly tracking her heart every single day. On the evening of Saturday, January 31, 2026, Nancy had dinner with her daughter Annie and Annie's husband, Tommaso Cioni, at their home nearby. It was the kind of unremarkable family evening that happens in millions of homes. Good food, good company, and then the drive home. Tommaso dropped Nancy off at her house in the Catalina foothills at approximately 9:45 to 9:50 p.m. Surveillance from the neighborhood confirmed her garage door closing behind her at around 9:50. That image, a garage door slowly descending on a quiet desert night, would later become, in hindsight, the last confirmed visual of Nancy Guthrie in her normal life. The house went quiet. The neighborhood went quiet. Then the quiet broke. At 1:47 in the morning, nearly 4 hours after Nancy had gone inside, something happened to her doorbell camera. It disconnected. The specific model installed on Nancy's door was a Google Nest Video doorbell, a device that, like millions of similar products across America, was designed to detect motion, capture footage, and store that footage in the cloud for the homeowner to review. There was one problem. Nancy did not have an active Google subscription. For the average consumer, that detail feels decisive. No subscription means no cloud storage. No cloud storage means no video. No video means no evidence. That's the simple mental equation most of us carry around about these devices, and it's the equation that, in the early days of the investigation, law enforcement appeared to accept at face value. But something else happened at 2:12 in the morning. Even without a subscription, even with the camera now disconnected from its primary feed, the Nest system's sensors detected motion near the front of the house. The software registered it, it logged it, and then, because there was no subscription, it appeared to store nothing. At 2:28 a.m., the final digital heartbeat, Nancy's pacemaker stopped syncing with her Apple devices. Think about that for a moment. A pacemaker is not a fitness tracker. It is a medical device. It monitors a person's heart. And at 2:28 in the morning on February 1st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker, the device keeping rhythm with her heart, dropped its wireless connection to her phone. In the cold forensic language of a police report, it disconnected. In human terms, it meant that wherever Nancy was going, she was going beyond the range of her own home, beyond the familiar digital geography of her own bedroom, her own kitchen, her own life. The trail had gone cold before anyone even knew to look for it. Nancy didn't make it to church the next morning. Every Sunday, she watched an online service, the kind of thing that became popular during the pandemic and never went away for millions of older Americans who found community in the virtual congregation. When she didn't appear for the live stream, a member of her church noticed. They contacted the family. Something was wrong. By late morning, relatives had driven to Nancy's house. They searched it room by room. Her phone was on the table. Her wallet was inside. Her daily medication, the medication that could be fatal to skip, was untouched on the counter. Every item that a woman planning to go anywhere would have taken with her was still in that house. She was not. Around noon on February 1st, the family called 911. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, led by Sheriff Chris Nanos, responded and opened a missing persons investigation that would, within hours, be reclassified as something much darker. Deputies who examined the home found bloodstains. They were confirmed through subsequent forensic analysis to belong to Nancy. The department quickly determined that she had not left on her own. In Nanos's words at an early press conference, they saw some things at the home that were concerning. Within days, the Pima County Sheriff's Department brought in the FBI, Customs and Border Protection, and several search and rescue teams. The multi-agency task force that assembled around Nancy Guthrie's disappearance would eventually grow to include roughly 24 active investigators at any given time. The case was clearly not going to be solved overnight, and yet, in those critical first 48 hours, some decisions were made, or not made, that would come to define the early phase of the investigation. The doorbell camera. The Google Nest device that had been mounted on Nancy's front door. Sheriff Nanos stated early and clearly in his public briefings that the camera had been disconnected the morning of the disappearance, and that because Nancy did not have a subscription to Google's cloud storage service, there was no video. He told the media, he told the public, and, by implication, He told the investigative team the camera was useless. What Nanos apparently did not do was immediately reach out to Google's back-end infrastructure teams to explore what data might still exist below the surface level of a standard cloud subscription. As we'll explain in a moment, that distinction matters enormously. Because the FBI, when they leaned in harder on the investigation, did not accept Nanos' assessment as the end of the story. Meanwhile, the investigation was already attracting a level of public attention that made the pressure on law enforcement almost impossible to overstate. Savannah Guthrie, one of the most visible journalists in America, stepped away from her duties at NBC's Today show, including co-hosting assignments that were supposed to include coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics, to join her siblings in the search for their mother. In a video posted to Instagram alongside Annie and Cameron, Savannah looked directly into the camera and said, with devastating simplicity, "We believe she is still alive. Bring her home." That video reached tens of millions of people within hours. The case that had started as a local missing persons report was now a national story. On February 3rd, just 2 days after Nancy was reported missing, ransom notes began arriving. Not at the Guthrie family home, not at the police department, at news stations. TMZ received one. Culled, a Tucson CBS affiliate, received one. KGUN 9, another Tucson station, received one. The choice of media outlets as recipients was deliberate and strange, a calculated attempt to generate maximum pressure through maximum visibility. The notes demanded payment in Bitcoin. The initial figure that emerged was staggering, $6 million worth of cryptocurrency to be transferred to a specific Bitcoin wallet address by 5 p.m. on February 9th. The threat, in blunt terms, pay by the deadline or face the consequences for Nancy's life. The Guthrie family responded publicly and bravely. In a video that circulated widely, Savannah said the words no family should ever have to say on camera. "We received your message and we understand. We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay." They were willing to pay. They were willing to do anything. But paying a Bitcoin ransom is not like handing over a briefcase of cash. A blockchain forensics specialist named Bezalel Eithan Raviv, CEO of Lionsgate Network, explained to the New York Post something critically important about the Bitcoin angle in this case. The moment a wallet address appears in a ransom demand, investigators have something actionable. Cryptocurrency, for all its reputation as an anonymous payment system, runs on a public ledger. Every transaction is recorded. Every wallet has a traceable history. The FBI and cryptocurrency forensics firms can map the network of transactions surrounding a wallet and, in many cases, identify the real-world individuals behind it. The deadline of February 9th passed without any confirmed communication between the alleged captors and the Guthrie family. Then a second note arrived, demanding 1 Bitcoin, at the time roughly $65,000 to $70,000, from someone claiming not to be the kidnapper, but to know who the kidnapper was, and to be willing to sell that information. The tone of this second series of notes was different, erratic, paranoid, and, as it turned out, unrelated to the actual crime. The FBI eventually arrested a man named Derek Kalela in connection with sending fake ransom messages to Savannah Guthrie. He has since been charged with that offense, and a trial date has been set. Kalela is not accused of being involved in Nancy's abduction itself. His case is a separate tragedy, a person who chose the worst possible moment to run a fraud, exploiting a family's public agony for personal gain. But another note writer, persistent, anonymous and unverified, continued sending messages to TMZ well into April. As recently as April 6, 2026, that same unidentified individual sent 2 new letters to TMZ claiming to have seen Nancy alive in the Mexican state of Sonora. The person demanded 1 Bitcoin for the information. Authorities have not confirmed or denied whether the claim has any validity. Sonora borders Arizona. Tucson sits roughly 70 miles from the international border. One retired FBI agent who reviewed early ransom materials noted something peculiar. One of the notes used the term USD to refer to dollars, a phrasing an American would be unlikely to use. It raised the question of whether the individuals who took Nancy might have foreign connections. No definitive answer has been established. What was briefly notable in the Bitcoin angle was this. On February 10th, the same day the FBI released surveillance footage from Nancy's doorbell camera, a transaction was recorded in the Bitcoin wallet listed in one of the ransom notes. The amount confirmed by local outlet Arizona's Family, approximately $152, not $6 million, $152. Whether this was a law enforcement probe, a random curiosity-driven transaction by a member of the public who found the wallet address in media coverage, or something else entirely, authorities have never clarified. It remains one of the case's many unresolved threads. The technical explanation we walked through earlier, the free event history, the residual data, the pipeline review, tells you what the FBI did, but it doesn't fully explain how extraordinary it was or why most law enforcement agencies in America couldn't have done it without Google's active cooperation. When you buy a Google Nest camera, you are not buying a standalone recording device. You are buying an endpoint in a vast, globally distributed computing infrastructure. The moment that camera detects motion, any motion with or without a subscription, it begins transmitting data. That data travels from your doorstep through your home network, through your internet service provider, and into Google's cloud architecture, which spans data centers across multiple states and countries. At every point in that journey, data can be temporarily cached, compressed, queued for processing, or held in a buffer while the system decides what to do with it next. For users without a subscription, the decision the system eventually makes is discard. But discard happens on a schedule, not instantly. And between the moment data is flagged for discarding and the moment it is actually overwritten by something new, there exists a window, sometimes hours, sometimes longer, during which forensic specialists can retrieve it. The challenge is knowing where to look. Google's server infrastructure is not a single filing cabinet. It is thousands of machines spread across facilities in places like the Dalles, Oregon, and Council Bluffs, Iowa, processing billions of data points every second. Finding a specific fragment of video from a specific camera at a specific moment requires not just technical skill, but intimate knowledge of how the Nest system is architected, knowledge that only Google's own engineers possess. This is why the partnership between the FBI and Google was not optional. It was essential. Federal agents brought the legal authority, a search warrant. Google's engineers brought the map. Google's own privacy policy, buried in the documentation that comes with every Nest device and that virtually no consumer reads in full, actually acknowledges the underlying reality. It states explicitly that video can be captured and transmitted to servers even when a device appears to be offline or disconnected, and that the company cannot always guarantee that footage will be permanently deleted on the user's expected timeline. That doesn't mean the data doesn't still get pushed up into the cloud, which it likely did, cybersecurity policy expert Stacey Higginbotham of Consumer Reports explained during coverage of the case. But it does mean that once Google gets it and they realize there's no subscription, they have no obligation to retain the data. The distinction is critical. No obligation to retain is not the same as already deleted. The FBI obtained their search warrant. The engineers went to work. And after days of combing through back-end systems, development pipelines, compression queues, distributed storage nodes, they found what everyone had been told didn't exist. The video they recovered was not cinema-quality footage. It was fragmentary. It was imperfect. It showed exactly what it needed to show. On the evening of February 10, 2026, 9 days after Nancy Guthrie was reported missing, FBI Director Kash Patel posted 4 black-and-white still images on the social media platform X. Moments later, the FBI released 2 short video clips. The Pima County Sheriff's Department posted the same materials simultaneously. What those images showed stopped the country cold. A figure, masked, gloved, carrying a backpack, standing at Nancy Guthrie's front door. The mask covered the suspect's face entirely, leaving only the eyes visible. The individual was wearing a jacket, dark pants, and gloves. Critically, the suspect was armed. According to FBI Director Patel, the gun was visible in a front holster, positioned, in his words, improperly, suggesting someone who was not a trained firearms professional. A former FBI supervisory special agent named James Galliano, reviewing the footage for Fox News, was blunt in his assessment. It does not look like a trained assassin or somebody who's been doing this a long time. I look at the gun. I've never seen somebody carry a weapon that way. This detail matters because it tells us something about who might have taken Nancy Guthrie. This was not, based on the video evidence, a professional hit. It was not the work of a cartel, which, as one expert noted, would have been more sophisticated, moved faster, used a team, and removed the camera immediately. This was someone who planned enough to bring a mask, a gun, and a backpack. But their execution, their gun handling, their attempt to disable the camera, all of it suggested something between impulsive and clumsily premeditated. The video also showed the intruder attempting to tamper with the doorbell camera itself. First, they tapped at the device, apparently trying to knock it off its mount. When that failed, they reached for a nearby potted plant and used the foliage to cover the camera lens. It was a crude countermeasure from someone who clearly understood that the camera was there, but who may not have fully understood whether it was actively recording. On February 12th, based on the footage and whatever additional forensic enhancement had been applied, authorities released a more specific physical description of the suspect. Estimated height of 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches. Average build. A black mustache visible below the mask, and a very specific item, a 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker Pack backpack. That last detail is significant because it's the kind of granular, purchasing record searchable clue that investigators can run against retail databases and loyalty programs. The FBI stated through spokesman Ben Williamson that the clips were released within hours of being received. But the recovery process itself had taken over a week. Days of technical work that the Bureau undertook quietly, behind the scenes, before going public with what they found. Why the delay in release? Joseph Giacalone, a retired New York police sergeant who oversaw hundreds of homicide and missing persons cases, offered a reasonable explanation. You're trying to keep these things close to the vest. I think they worked this angle for a couple days. They were trying to quietly identify the person on Guthrie's porch before releasing the images. It is standard investigative practice to avoid tipping off a suspect by releasing identifying footage prematurely. The FBI was not hiding evidence. They were being strategic. The release of the video was a breakthrough. But it also threw a harsh light on the fault lines that had been running beneath the investigation from the very beginning. The most visible fault line ran directly through Sheriff Chris Nanos. Nanos, who has served as Pima County Sheriff since 2020, was already under significant political pressure before Nancy Guthrie disappeared. He was facing a recall effort. And it emerged, first through reporting by the Arizona Republic, and later through broader national coverage, that his department had spent months actively cooperating with the production of a reality television show called Desert Law, which premiered on A&E on January 7, 2026. 24 days after that premiere, Nancy Guthrie was abducted. The show was produced by 2020 Productions. Captain Robert Comel of the Pima County Sheriff's Office served as the primary point of contact between the department and the production company, instructing deputies to cooperate with the A&E crew. This was not a secret. It was an institutional choice the department made openly. But the optics, in the context of an investigation that was drawing massive criticism for its early missteps, were devastating. The missteps themselves were documented. The department's own fixed-wing Cessna aircraft reportedly sat on the tarmac for roughly half a day after Nancy was reported missing before being deployed. Crime scene tape around Nancy's home was put up and taken down multiple times, a fact Nanos himself publicly acknowledged. Early physical evidence finds raised more questions than answers. A pair of black gloves found approximately 2 miles from the house was submitted for DNA analysis. The DNA on those gloves was eventually traced to a local restaurant worker, described by the Pima County Sheriff as not considered part of this investigation. Separately, questions about Nanos's background resurfaced. According to a December 2025 deposition, Nanos testified that he had never been suspended during his time at the El Paso Police Department in Texas. The Arizona Republic later reported that he had been accused of covering up suspensions he allegedly received there in the 1980s. Nanos denied the allegation. Whether or not the Board of Pima County Supervisors acts on these matters remains unresolved. Perhaps the most damaging critique came from an unusually high-profile source, former U.S. Surgeon General Richard Carmona. Carmona spent more than 30 years with the Pima County Sheriff's Department as a deputy sheriff, detective, SWAT team leader, and medical commander, before serving as the 17th Surgeon General of the United States under President George W. Bush. He knows this department better than almost anyone alive, and his assessment was withering. "We're managing a senior citizen who's lost and a sheriff who seems to have lost his way," Carmona said publicly. He used the word incompetent more than once, and when pressed on whether that reflected his law enforcement colleagues' views, he said, "Most of my colleagues here that I've spoken to, both in the federal agencies as well as state agencies, use that term. That is not a political opponent. That is a man who gave his professional life to that department, speaking on the record." To be clear and fair, law enforcement investigations of this complexity rarely unfold cleanly. The FBI, by most accounts, handled its role with far greater technical sophistication, and some of the early delays in releasing the doorbell footage may have been deliberate and strategic, not negligent. But the cumulative picture of the investigation's early weeks, from the grounded aircraft to the reality TV partnership to the dismissal of the camera's evidentiary potential, left a public record that is difficult to defend. As of late April 2026, the investigation is ongoing. No suspect has been named. No arrest has been made in connection with Nancy's abduction. Her whereabouts remain unknown. But the forensic work continues, and the tools being brought to bear are extraordinary. Among the most significant recent developments, the FBI has been conducting advanced analysis on DNA samples recovered from Nancy's home. The samples in question are described by investigators as mixed DNA, genetic material from more than one person. That complexity is part of why analysis has taken so long. Pima County Sheriff Nanos told a local neighborhood watch group that separating and isolating the individual DNA profiles within a mixed sample could take up to 6 more months. He confirmed that as many as 5 labs around the country are working on various aspects of the Guthrie case. One of those labs may be among the most capable forensic genetics facilities in the United States. In April 2026, reporting emerged that Astrea Forensics, a San Francisco-based laboratory that played a pivotal role in the conviction of Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann, is believed to be involved in the Guthrie investigation. Astrea developed a DNA profile from rootless hair evidence in the Heuermann case, a technically demanding feat that helped send a man who had evaded justice for decades to prison. Cece Moore, one of America's foremost genetic genealogists and a researcher at Parabon Nanolabs in Virginia, told Fox News, "I am pretty confident that they will want to use the lab that they have been extremely successful with, which is Astrea. The FBI used them for the Gilgo case. So they have a lot of confidence in Astrea. The methodology likely involves something called forensic genetic genealogy, a technique that constructs a DNA profile from a sample, uploads it to genealogical databases, and then uses family tree research to identify likely relatives of the contributor. It was this technique that identified Heuermann, and it has since been used to crack cold cases across the country. An original hair sample that was collected from Nancy's home in the days immediately following her disappearance and was initially sent to a private Florida lab that works with the Pima County Sheriff's Department has now been transferred to the FBI. The Bureau confirmed this transfer in April, though FBI Assistant Director for Public Affairs Ben Williamson was careful to clarify that this was not new evidence. The DNA had been part of the investigation all along. The FBI's involvement with more advanced technology represented an escalation of analytical tools, not the discovery of fresh material. Williamson's statement, posted to X, was direct. FBI asked to test this DNA 2 months ago with the same technology we've always had, when the local sheriff instead sent it to a private lab. Any further developments we will share as soon as appropriate. That statement, read carefully, is pointed. The FBI asked to test the DNA 2 months ago. The sheriff sent it elsewhere. There it is, another fracture line, quietly acknowledged in a government press statement. Across all of this forensic complexity and institutional friction, it is easy to lose sight of the human beings at the center of the story. So let's bring it back. Savannah Guthrie has lived the last 3 months of her life in a state of suspended grief that no amount of professional achievement can cushion. She stepped away from a career she spent decades building, from the Today Show anchor desk, from the Winter Olympics coverage she was supposed to anchor, to search for her mother. When she returned to Today in early April 2026, producers had to implement strict new protocols for handling any breaking news about the investigation that might emerge during a live broadcast, including physically removing Savannah from the set so she wouldn't learn of developments on air. In her first interview since her mother's disappearance, Savannah sat down with her friend and former co-anchor Hoda Kotb and said something that broke millions of hearts. "I'm so sorry, Mommy. I'm so sorry," she added. "It's too much to bear to think that I brought this to her bedside, that it's because of me." The fear that her own public profile made her mother a target. the guilt of visibility. Those words carry a weight that goes well beyond this case. They speak to something universal about family, protection, and the things we cannot control. The family announced a $1 million reward for information leading to Nancy's recovery. In the same announcement, Savannah acknowledged a brutal reality. The family still believes in a miracle, she said, but they also know that Nancy may already be gone. Let that land for a moment. On April 6th, the same day Savannah returned to the Today anchor desk, new letters arrived at TMZ from the same anonymous writer who had been sending ransom-adjacent communications for months. This person claimed to have seen Nancy alive in the state of Sonora, Mexico, and demanded 1 Bitcoin to deliver information. They also claimed to have been out of the United States for more than 5 years, and to have had nothing to do with the abduction itself. Investigators have not confirmed or denied any of the specifics in those letters. Meanwhile, the search on the ground continues. The United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue organization that gained national prominence during Hurricane Katrina and has since responded to dozens of missing persons cases, has reached out to the Pima County Sheriff's Department with a formal proposal to join the search effort. About 24 Pima County and FBI investigators remain actively assigned to the case as of late April 2026. The Pima County Sheriff's Department stated in a formal update that it is refocusing resources, language that sounds bureaucratic, but in practice means the intensive early phase of daily press conferences and large-scale canvassing operations has given way to a slower, more methodical approach focused on lab analysis and investigative leads. They were careful to add, "This remains an active investigation and will continue until Nancy Guthrie is located or all leads have been exhausted." Day 87 of the search for Nancy Guthrie. The Nancy Guthrie case will be studied for years, and not just by true crime audiences. It will be studied by law enforcement agencies, technology companies, privacy advocates, and forensic scientists, because it sits at the intersection of several forces that are reshaping what justice looks like in the digital age. Let's talk about the cloud camera issue first, because it is the most technically significant element of this case and the one with the widest implications. Millions of American homes now have some form of smart doorbell or connected camera. Google Nest, Ring, Arlo, Wise. The market is enormous. And the vast majority of the people who own these devices operate under a fundamentally incorrect assumption about what happens when a camera is disconnected or when a subscription lapses. They assume camera off, data gone. This case demonstrated, in the most high-profile possible way, that assumption is wrong. The data transmitted by a connected camera, even one without an active subscription, flows through a complex digital infrastructure before it is definitively overwritten. It passes through device memory, router logs, ISP routing infrastructure, and cloud back-end systems at multiple geographic locations. At each stop along that journey, residual traces can persist for hours, days, or even weeks before they are definitively overwritten. For law enforcement, this is a capability. For privacy advocates, it is a concern. The Electronic Frontier Foundation and similar organizations have been raising this issue for years. The gap between what consumers are told about their data and what actually happens to it in the cloud is significant, and it is largely unexplained in the dense terms of service agreements that virtually no consumer reads in full. When a law enforcement agency can recover video footage that a homeowner believed was never recorded and do so without the homeowner's knowledge or consent, operating only under the authority of a search warrant, questions arise about the scope of the digital record we are all generating simply by living in connected homes. At the same time, it is impossible to watch this case unfold and not feel something when the FBI pulls that image from the depths of Google's back-end infrastructure. Because what they pulled was a face, masked but present, standing at the door of an 84-year-old woman in the middle of the night. That image is evidence. That image is justice waiting to be delivered. The tension is real, and it is not easily resolved. The same technology that gives investigators a window into a crime can, in a different context, give them a window into the private life of someone who has done nothing wrong. The legal framework governing digital evidence in the United States, still largely built around court precedents that predate smartphones, let alone smart cameras, is struggling to keep pace. The Guthrie case adds urgency to conversations that were already happening in policy circles. Should tech companies be required to explicitly inform users that data can be retained and recovered even without a subscription? Should there be standardized protocols for how quickly law enforcement agencies escalate digital forensic requests in missing persons cases? Should the FBI's forensic capabilities be more directly integrated into the first response toolkit for local departments handling cases like this? These are questions that will take years to resolve legislatively, but the Guthrie case has given them a human face and a human cost. There is also a lesson here about the coordination gap between local and federal law enforcement. The FBI has forensic capabilities that most sheriff's departments simply do not. When a case involves connected devices, cloud infrastructure, and the kind of technical complexity that the Guthrie investigation revealed, the question of who gets called first and how quickly the federal agency with the right expertise is brought in can determine whether evidence survives or is overwritten. In this case, critical days passed before the full weight of the FBI's technical resources was brought to bear on the camera evidence. Whether that delay was the result of a deliberate investigative strategy, a bureaucratic failure, a resource limitation, or something more personal, as some reporting has suggested, with hints of tension between the Pima County Sheriff's Office and the FBI, we may not know fully until the case is resolved. What we do know is that 9 days passed between Nancy's disappearance and the release of the footage. In a kidnapping case, 9 days is a geological age. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. No suspect has been charged with her abduction. No confirmed communication from her captors has been publicly verified. Her family has offered $1.2 million in combined reward money, $1 million from the family, $50,000 from the FBI, and additional contributions from the public for information leading to her recovery. The investigation is alive. The DNA work at Astrea Forensics and the FBI's advanced laboratories continues. The anonymous letter writer who claimed to have seen Nancy in Sonora, Mexico, has not provided verification. A man is on trial for sending fake ransom texts to Savannah, and a masked figure with a black mustache and a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack is, as far as we know, still unidentified and unapprehended. Nancy Guthrie was a woman who lived a full life, raised 3 children, survived the death of her husband when her kids were young, kept her faith, kept her garden, kept her routines, kept her heart sinking every night to a device that tracked its rhythm for her. On the night of January 31st, 2026, someone came to her door and took all of that away from her. The camera that was supposed to be dead gave us the image of the person who did it. The investigation that was supposed to have no leads now has multiple forensic threads being pulled simultaneously. And somewhere, in a server farm in Oregon or Iowa, in a laboratory in San Francisco, in the digital labyrinth of a Bitcoin blockchain, in a letter sitting in an FBI inbox, there may already be the information that brings Nancy home or brings her family the truth they need to finally grieve. The Crime Blackline archive will be here when that moment arrives. If you have any information about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or visit tips.fbi.gov. There is a combined reward of more than $1.2 million for information that leads to her recovery. If this deep dive brought clarity to a case this complex, please hit like and share this video. Subscribe to the Crime Blackline archive for the most thorough coverage of investigations that matter. We'll be following every development in this case, every lab result, every new lead, every document obtained, until there are answers. The truth is in there. We just have to keep looking. The teeth. Crime Blackline Archive. All facts in this script are sourced from verified reporting by NBC News, CBS News, NPR, Fortune, Fox News, News Nation, the Arizona Republic, ABC News, the Associated Press, and Wikipedia's case summary current as of April 27, 2026. No fabricated quotes, invented evidence, or unverified claims have been included.